Okay. Can everyone see the screen all right?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Bhante.
Okay, so welcome everybody to the seventh night of the series of lectures on the Satipatthana, or the Found Foundations of Mindfulness. So we'll continue where we left off last week. But to begin, we'll put our palms together and Anjali as a sign of respect for the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And we'll recite Namo Tassa 3 times. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the Fully Enlightened One. Homage to the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, which lead from death to the deathless. Homage to the Sangha, the community of the Buddha's disciples who inspire and guide. Okay, everybody? So, where we left off last week, we discussed contemplation of the 4 elements, Dhatu Manasikara. So we went through the earth element, which is hardness or softness, water element, which is liquidity or cohesion, air element, which is pushing, movement, airiness in the body, and the fire element or the heat element, which is heat, coldness, and has the ability to age or digest. So we direct our mindfulness and clear comprehension to experience these different qualities in the body and how they present themselves. How do we experience these different elements within the body? They each have their own characteristics. We experience those characteristics in the body. We feel the hardness, we feel softness, we feel sweat, which is in the water element. The body is held together by its cohesion of the water element mixed with the earth element. The breathing, in-breath, out-breath, air element, heat, coldness, digestion in the body, or the ability for the body to age is an example of the fire element or that heating element. So we learn to direct the mind to see these things in the body. Don't see an I, a me, or myself. We just see these elements presenting themselves. The body being the body, these elements being the body, and how we experience them. We see that they're always changing. There's something happening within this body. So the fact that we can experience movement of air and heat, that's an experience. It is unstable, always changing, always moving. Therefore, this idea of me, myself is not so solidified anymore. It's just elements happening. Not an I, not a me, not a myself, just these elements. So that's what we went over last week. So if you want to watch the video for that, you can go to the website, go to YouTube, and find that video. But we'll continue on where we left off. And tonight is definitely the doozy, definitely not everyone's most favorite section of the Satipatthana Sutta, but a very important one. And this is the 9 charnel ground contemplations, the Nagasi Vatika Pabbam. So the Buddha says, again, bhikkhus or meditators, as though he were to see a corpse thrown aside in a charnel ground, 1, 2, or 3 days dead, bloated, livid, and oozing matter. Same corpse being devoured by crows, hawks, vultures, dogs, jackals, or various kinds of worms. A skeleton with flesh and blood held together with sinews. A fleshless skeleton smeared with blood held together with sinews. A skeleton without flesh and blood held together with sinews. Disconnected bones scattered in all directions. Here a hand bone, there a foot bone, here a shin bone, there a thigh bone, here a hip bone, there a backbone, here a rib bone, there a breastbone, here an arm bone, there a shoulder bone, here a neck bone, there a jaw bone, here a tooth, there the skull. Again, as though he were to see a corpse thrown aside in eternal ground, bones bleached white, the color of shells, bones heaped up, bones more than a year old, rotted and crumbled to dust. A bhikkhu compares this body with it thus. This body too is of the same nature. This body too is of the same nature. It will be like that. It is not exempt from that fate. In this way, he abides contemplating the body as a body internally, externally, and both internally and externally. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That too is how a bhikkhu abides, contemplating the body as a body. So in this section of the sutta, the Buddha gives us a lot to reflect on. He gives us all these various ways of reflecting on the impermanence of this body. Goes from a fresh corpse, a few days old, to it being nothing more than dust. This is the nature of the body. Not just the corpse that he's speaking about, but our body. There's no difference between the body that we are observing in the text to our own body. A body is just a body. The only thing is that this body is still alive, but it is going through changes, just as it's going through changes with the 30 parts of the body, with the elements, in breath, out breath. This body is always moving, it's always changing. But in this section of the sutta, the body is taking its final changes. And it's not always pretty. Actually, no, it's probably very pretty, but it's still the nature of the body. And I think the most important section of these reflections is this section I've highlighted, I've made larger. A bhikkhu compares the same body with it thus. This body too is of the same nature. It will be like that. It is not exempt from that fate. So as we are contemplating the nature of death, the truth of death, this is what we need to keep in mind, that our body is no different. Though it's moving, though we're speaking, though we have lives, death is an inevitability. We're going to experience death at some point. That this nature of change and of rot, of decomposition is going to happen at some point. But let's go down a little bit further. Let's see what I wrote. So the purpose of this practice is, whether we like it or not, we are all going to have loss. We're all going to lose somebody that we love. We're going to lose people that we hate. Death is the great equalizer. We all experience the good, the bad, the ugly, loved ones, indifferent people. Death, when we all come into existence, when we're born, whether we're young, middle age, old age, death can happen. We can experience. We like to think that death is something that is far off. And if we're lucky, it is far off. We'll die 80s, 90s, maybe even 100. But that's not always up to us to decide. We like to imagine that we're going to have long lives, or the ones that we love are going to have long lives. We can wish for it, we can pray for it, we can beg for it, but there's no way that we can decide that. Death and loss are a part of this life. So with this practice of reflecting on that truth, that death can come, death is a part of this existence, that whatever is born will eventually can die. We learn to embrace it, to acknowledge it, to not have fantasies of I control when someone's going to die, or no matter what I pray for or wish for, death comes when it wants to come, in its various forms. So by reflecting on it, by accepting it, by seeing it in our contemplations, we learn to become more open to it, to embrace it more. This is one of the purposes of the practice, one of many. And the benefits of this practice. The first benefit that I like to talk about is we develop a sense of wholesome urgency. As I just mentioned, who knows when death is going to happen? We can go to bed at night, we can die in our sleep. So we might be in our 30s, 40s, 50s. We go to bed, we never wake up again. So when we're practicing this contemplation on death, we say death can come at any time. Who knows when it's going to happen? So we need to do what we need to do. We need to practice what we need to practice. We need to make amends when we need to make amends, or practice the 4 foundations of mindfulness, contemplation of death, as we're still alive. We don't leave things undone. But we also don't, I would consider this a wholesome sense of urgency, because it doesn't have fear in it. It doesn't have anxiety attached to it. Those things are not beneficial. But this realistic attitude, this open attitude, this seeing something that's not considered something very beautiful or pleasant to think about as something that we need to think about, that is the wholesome sense of urgency. It's not attached to fear, it's not attached to ignorance, it's not attached to paranoia or anything like that. It's just a very realistic attitude. It's a go-get-'em kind of attitude. So by practicing this mindfulness of death, we develop this wholesome sense of urgency of while we're still alive, we need to do everything that we need to do, because who knows how much longer we have. So we need to live positively, we need to live wholesomely, we need to live wisely. We need to listen to the teachings of the Buddha and put them into practice, because who knows how much longer? Who is the one who controls all these things? Nobody. It's just life is going on. How do we want to live it? So that's the first benefit of practicing mindfulness of death. The second is learning to let go of anger, grief, and fear. So knowing that we can die at any moment, people that we might not always get along with, we might have issues with them, things happened in the past. We'll learn to not hold on to that anger, this anger, hate, animosity towards people, because who wants to carry that around with them? When do you want to take that with you when you die? It's a very heavy mindset. It's a very poisoned mindset. And those things don't necessarily always go away when we pass away. If you're a follower of the teachings of the Buddha, you believe that though we physically die, mental attitudes dictate what will happen to us in our next existence. So anger, hatred, bitterness, jealousy, we learn to let those things go because we know the dangers of them. We know that we should make amends when we can make amends, make peace when we make peace while we have the time to make peace. You don't want to carry those around with us. And you don't want the people that you might have issues with to carry that with them as well after you die. Maybe they want to resolve issues, to learn to make peace and develop a dialogue, discuss the things that happened when you can. So you both could live much more peacefully in the time that we all have. Second is to learn to let go of grief. Of course, when we lose people that we love, we're going to feel some kind of sadness. We're going to feel some kind of grief. We have that. So we weep while we can't. We weep when we need to weep. We feel grief when we need to feel grief. But we also have that attitude of death is inevitable. Death is a part of life. All things that come into existence will pass away. So we don't go around beating our breasts, tearing out our hair. We could take this opportunity of loss to reflect that death is inevitable. Things will go on. There's other people who are still alive that we need to be there for and show and be an example that this is life. Life and death are going on constantly. So we don't drag on the grief. We don't drag on the weeping and the sorrow. We just learn to accept and take it as an opportunity to grow wiser in this life. And letting go of fear. So the letting go of fear and the last reflection, facing death with integrity. We get ready before we die, because who knows? Like I said, we could lay in bed at night, everything's fine. Next thing you know, tree falls, crushes you in your sleep. Death can happen at any time, in many, many different ways. One minute we're fine, laying in bed, next thing you know, tree falls to the roof, we get crushed. So as we're still alive, we practice this contemplation on death, and we don't fear it. We learn that this is life. We're born, we live, and we die. What's to be afraid of? I lived a good life. I lived a life practicing the Dhamma, practicing meditation. I've spoke things that were good, thought things that were good, said things that were good and wholesome. What's to fear? I follow the teachings of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. I've lived a good life. Inevitability of death. There's nothing to fear. So we learn to face death, to live it with integrity, to not show fear at this time because we've experienced it. We've thought about it. We've lived death while we were still alive. So there's nothing to fear. My teacher, when he was 85 years old, he had to get double bypass surgery. So he had heart problems and they weren't getting any better. So he finally went to another doctor, and they said he had blockage and he needed to get open heart surgery. He needed to do double bypass. So of course he's very old, little tiny monk, and of course they're very worried. They're like, okay, we don't usually do surgeries like this on people your age. So they're going through the paperwork with him, wanting him to sign everything before he went to surgery. And he said, "Don't worry, doctor. I've spent 40 years contemplating mindfulness of death. If I die on the table in surgery, don't worry about it. Death happens. It's inevitable. Don't you feel bad." They just put it away. So this is the power of contemplation of death. To not be so scared of it, not to, have fear of it, just to be like, that's a part of life. What's to be so worried about? Crying about it, worrying about it, being fearful of it doesn't serve us any good. But to show strength, to show wisdom, to show integrity when it comes to our deaths, that is something that's truly inspiring and truly benefits ourselves and others around us. So by practicing the mindfulness of death, this is what we can be like. This is what we can develop. Okay, so let's get into the practice of mindfulness of death. There's many different variations and different practices on mindfulness of death. The instructions that the Buddha gives with these 9 charnel ground contemplations. Some of the great teachers, they use this as their template. This is how they teach us the practice. In the time of the Buddha, they would go to charnel grounds. They would and examine the corpses, find different corpses at various stages of decomposition, sit there and reflect on them. But we don't have the luxury of charnel grounds anymore. Some monks or nuns will go to mortuaries or places where they'll be doing getting the body ready for burial or whatever, and contemplate on the dead corpse. But we are fresh out of dead corpse around us, so we can use visualization to see all these different variations of decomposition in our mind. But in other ways, we can practice this thing. Just always keep in mind that we're not so much focusing on other people's bodies, but our own deaths. That is what we need to keep in mind. So there's all different kinds of ways to practice mindfulness of death. You look them up online, you get different variations. Some are very detailed, other ones are fairly more simplified. So to get into our practice, we begin by getting in our meditation postures, either sitting on the floor on your backside, laying down on the floor, whichever feels comfortable for you. Taking your time to get comfortable, to let the mind rest on the body. Take a few deep inhales and exhales to settle the mind on the breath. Inhaling and exhaling, bringing in all those scattered energies, not thinking about the past, not planning for the future. Just letting the mind settle on the body, letting it settle in the mind, settle on the breath. And then visualize in your mind you just sitting. See your body just as it is, sitting in your meditation, sitting, lying down. To see yourself in your mind. So for this practice, we'll be using 5 reflections that you can find in the numerical discourses of the Buddha, the Anguttara Nikaya. So we'll be mixing these 5 reflections with the same verse. So 5 things have been well taught by the Sublime One who knows and sees, the worthy one, perfectly aligned one by himself. These are subjects always to be reflected upon by women or men, householders or those who have gone forth, for the both good for the householder and the monastic. What are the 5? So the first one, I am of the nature to decay. I'm not beyond decay. Death is certain, life is certain. So we reflect on this verse. I'm of the nature to decay. I have not gone beyond decay. From conception in the womb, to being born, to living, to growing old, the body is constantly in a state of change. So we might be young. Even when we're young, we're not very strong. We might be very energetic. So from a baby to a young child, we grow up in strength, gaining strength as we get older. But then it starts to fade away as we get older. And then we get older and older, frail, loss of hair, teeth falling out, back becoming crooked, skin becoming very soft and thin. We go through this process. But death is certain, life is uncertain. Death can come at any time. That is a promise. Who knows when we'll die? So we reflect on these 2 things. I am of the nature of decay. I have not gone beyond decay. So we're going through this transition in life. But death is certain, life is uncertain. So you can reflect on this Dhamma 3 times. I am of the nature to decay. I have not gone beyond decay. Death is certain, life is uncertain. So repeat that 3, 4, whatever amount of times you want to. Keeping that image of yourself in your mind. That this is my nature. I am of the nature of decay. Death is certain, life is uncertain. Reflecting it back to you. I am of the nature to be diseased. I have not gone beyond disease. Death is certain, life is uncertain. You can get sick anytime. You can get whatever kind of disease. Amazing how many people die of cancer. They lived very energetic lives, healthy lives, ate right, drank right, didn't smoke, exercised. The next thing you know, they can have some form of cancer. They can go for treatments, go for chemos, do everything they need to do. Cancer could come back. Or we can have any other kind of disease, hereditary diseases, sexually transmitted diseases. By being alive, this is the perils of life. Death is certain, life is uncertain. So we reflect on this truth, this nature. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond death. Death is certain, life is uncertain. So we can die anytime. Death waits for nobody. It answers to nobody. It is an inevitability. It is something that's, as we live, we can never truly escape. Because that's the nature. That is how things are. There's birth, there's life, there's death. We're open to anything, any form of death. Walk on the street, get hit by a car, lightning, flash floods, all kinds of things. So as long as we live, we're going to die. Best make peace with that. Best accept that nature. No need to fear it. No need to worry about it. Don't need to beg for more life. Just learn to have peace with it. Learn to accept it. Because you're begging, you're praying, you're wailing, they're just going to go to waste. No need to fear it. Just learn to accept it. Keep a peaceful, equanimous mind to it. So we can reflect on this. I am of the nature to die. I'm not come beyond death. Death is certain, life is uncertain. All that is mine, dear unto life. Whoa. Okay. Okay. So where we live. All that is mine, dear and delightful, will change and vanish. So it's not just us who are going through this nature of decay and disease and death, but it's also those that we hold on to, those things that we find delight in, and want and crave. All these things change, fall apart, leave, pass away, because their nature, no matter who it is, what it is of the nature. It's come into being. It'll soon pass. It will pass away at some point. Not that we can't have nice things. Not that we can have. Not that we shouldn't love people and try to be there for people. But we also need to be wise about it. Don't let it consume us. Don't let it fog our judgment and our wisdom. Always keep the wisdom. Always keep this reflection in the front of our mind. Love it. Take care of those that we love. Be there for them. But always know that things change, whether we like it to or not. It could be 20, 30, 40, 50 years, whatever. Death is certain. Life is uncertain. Clinging, holding, denying, repressing, whatever, those are poisons in the mind. They make us do things that are not wise, that are holding us back from developing understanding. But if we learn to keep this realistic, thoughtful, reflective, wise kind of attitude, that would just keep us, that would let us live much more peacefully and harmoniously without all that anxiety and stress and conflict. So all that is mine, dear and delightful will change and vanish. Death is certain, life is uncertain. I am the owner of my karma, our thoughts, words, and deeds, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, whether good or evil, of that I shall be the heir. So every thought, every word, every action, whether it's good or bad, that is what we leave behind. So by practicing this mindfulness of death, that is a positive karma. It leaves a good residue in the mind. Fear, hatred, worries, anxieties about death is an unwholesome karma because it narrows our perspective. It narrows our ability to grow with this reflection on death, these contemplations on death. It broadens our mind. It improves our mind. It lessens the other unwholesome karmas, the unwholesome mindsets. So by starting this practice, by contemplating on this. We're lessening those things that are unwholesome in our mind, things that leave a bad residue, that leave a bad taste in the mind, and then developing a much more wholesome karma. So that is what will shape the person that we will become. Though we might have fear and anxiety and don't want death right now, but by starting this practice, by doing it, by reflecting on death, that will shape who we are in the future, in this life or another life. So death is certain, life is uncertain. These are always to be reflected on in whether sitting, lying down, even walking around. Death is certain, life is uncertain. Reflect on one of these. So this is one way that we can start this mindfulness of death, this awareness of death. As I mentioned earlier, there's many different forms of mindfulness of death. Some are very detailed that will go on for long periods of time. This is just one to kind of help shape the mind, get us started on our mindfulness of death. And another one is to substitute the 5 reflections with the reflections of the 3 divine messengers: the sick person, the elderly person, and the corpse. So we can see a sick person in our mind, a person on their deathbed, hooked up to different medical equipments, people with sores and sweating and so forth. Or it can be even us in a sick bed, in a hospital. We can see, it can be us at our age right now, young, old, whatever, but sick. We see elderly persons in our minds, person with a crooked body, grayed hair, wrinkled skin, loss of teeth. And we can see the corpse in our mind at the various different stages of decomposition. So we can see them in our mind, reflect on their nature. Death is certain, life is uncertain. Go over it over and over again in our mind. See it, become familiar with these different aspects of death. That this is my nature, that this is the nature of this form, and it's also the nature of other forms as well. So this might not be the most pleasant topic in the Satipatthana, but it is an important one because it is inevitability. We're going to have to face this at some point. And we tend to not want to think about it. It has this stigma attached to it of being morbid or gross or sick to think about it. And if taken in the wrong way, it definitely can be that way. But this is a practice of wisdom. It is a practice of understanding. It is truth and inevitability. It is accepting something that happens every single day, 24/7, 365 days a year. People are dying in different ways, no matter who they are, no matter where they are, rich, poor, young, old, black, white, brown, man, woman. Death is inevitable. So what's so gross about that? What is so sick about that? What is so morbid about that? It's not. It is something that happens. Happens to enemies, happens to loved ones, happens to us, happens to other people. So why not think about it? Why not prepare for it beforehand? So with our mindfulness and clear comprehension, we can practice these contemplations, think about it, see it in ourselves and in others as well. So I think that is all I have to say for this evening. And this is not just, so the part of the sutta ends with the same ending as all the others. We do it for ourselves, we do it for others, we do it for both. It has the same ending as all the other sections of the contemplation of the body. And this ends actually the Kaya Nupassana, the section on reflecting of the body, mindfulness of the body. So next week, not next week, but the weekend after, the Sunday after, we'll begin a whole new section of the Satipatthana, and that'll be mindfulness of feelings. So we're all done with the body, starting with mindfulness of breathing and ending with the contemplation of death. So that ends the lecture for this evening. So we can go into Q&A. So let me expand screen and stop the sharing. Okay, so you can raise your little hand or you can write your comments in the box. This looks like we have some comments in the box, some questions in the box. So the first question is, Bhante, my dad passed away on the 24th of August, 2022. Yesterday was his funeral. We have Theravada monks come on a daily basis to chant for him in the Mahatero, and another monk chanted for him before his coffin was pushed into burner for cremation. Also, Marasati group chanting on a daily, Maranusati group chanting on a daily basis. Could you please advise what other activities we could do for my dad? Thank you. He passed away in the ICU after I chanted 108 times of Itipiso. His last breath listening to Ratana Sutta. I witnessed the change of his facial expression from pain and suffering to very serene, very good, peaceful and smiling. So yeah, so when we lose our loved ones, we can do all different kinds of things for them while they're in the hospital and afterwards. We can practice mindfulness, we can practice meditation, recite verses like the Ratana Sutta, the Metta Sutta, and the Mangala Sutta, or any other sutta of the Buddha. You can make it a habit to practice these different powerful things, and then share the merits of doing those acts with those who we love who have passed away. Just as we finish up our Sunday program by sharing the merits of our activities with those who are dead, our loved ones who have passed, or any other being who might be in need of it. So, but it sounds like he had a very good death by you being there, by doing these different things with him. So he's very, very fortunate to have a child who was able to do those things with him. It is normal for me to see the white images or hear noises or smells the odor of departed family members immediately within 100 days after their death. In my dad's case, I could not sense anything that he is hanging around. Do you think he has gone for spontaneous rebirth? That's not for me to know. It sounds from the description of his death that he had a very good death. Seems like he was very at peace with his death. So I can't see why he would want to hang around. Yeah, seems like he knew exactly where he was going, and what he had to do to move on. So I'm sure he's found a very nice, he is where he needs to be, no doubt. Um, Thank you, Mandy, for the excellent lecture on death contemplating. It helps me face with death in a direct way based on your matter of fact, death is certain. Well, thank you, everybody, for the very positive comments, as always. Well, thank you, everybody. Yeah, sadhu, 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 everyone. Let's see if there's any hands. So yeah, please ask questions. We ended early. We finished up the lecture early. It's something that we tend to go through very quickly. We don't, it can make people feel very uncomfortable. Even though I found when I first read the Satipatthana Sutta, I found this contemplation, the Mindfulness of Death section, to be so interesting because it is very matter of fact. It's one of the reasons why I chose Theravada Buddhism, the very kind of in your face, matter of fact, the approach of the Buddha. And had just that sense of authenticity with this contemplation of death. You know, it's not beautiful, it's not watered down, it is what it is. So yeah, so but not everyone, of course, feels that way. So um, but yeah, it's something I've always found, this part of the sutta I've always found very interesting. Okay, let's see, we got more questions in the box. Yeah, Bhante, if becoming anxious or frightened during these contemplations, how can we recover our calm? Chanting the ET Piso. Yeah, chant ET Piso, or I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Practice metta. Anything that has that calming quality to it, that gives us strength. Yeah, and then yes, developing that sense of confidence in the Buddha as well, that saddha into the Buddha, because the Buddha would not steer us wrong. He's our touchstone. Exactly. Yeah, develop metta or karuna for myself. Yeah, exactly. Anything that kind of removes us from the particular subject. We're not necessarily running away from it, but it's we need a little bit more comfort. Metta and karuna are usually considered a calming balm, like a balm, like you would put on a wound. Um, so yeah, no, and there's no harm in just taking a break from it. Would you do more other suttas when the Satipatthana Sutta, of course, ends? I love your simple, clear style for dummies. You guys, I'm a dummy too, so we're all a bunch of dummies here. I don't think I'll be doing any other suttas, but who knows? Um, let's just get through the Satipatthana right now. So Sheila says contemplation of death resonates with her. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It should resonate with everybody. We're all going to experience it in one form or another in our lives. So let's make peace with it. Um, I witnessed someone's dog suffering and dying without pain meds. He doesn't believe in euthanasia. I was able to get some morphine tablets for the dog, but she passed 3 hours later. Is euthanasia so wrong for a suffering sentient being who doesn't understand why they are suffering? Um, I don't really feel comfortable answering that question. Uh, yeah, it's something I'm not totally familiar with or really given much thought about. And it can cause some conflicts with the other practitioners who hold different views. So I don't really want to go into it that much. But it's a very important question and one that we should take up individually. Don't try to put any kind of dogma behind it. Bhante would envision Pure Land or the Buddha's land will help a person during the dying process. Um, I think a mixture of contemplation on death or impermanence and the reflection on the Pure Land or the Pure Land could definitely help a person during their dying process. Reciting Amitabha or Amitofo, Namo Amitofo has helped many, many people die very peacefully and probably be reborn in the Pure Land. So, but unfortunately, in a lot of modern versions of Pure Land Buddhism, no one really likes to think about death or impermanence. It's all just about getting to the Pure Land, which I don't think was the original purpose of Amitabha reflection. So don't neglect the practice of mindfulness of death and impermanence, and just take that road of just envisioning the Pure Land or reciting Amitabha. I think it was all meant to be same, working together. Okay, let's see what else we got going on. Great questions, everybody. We're all doing awesome. It's almost 8:30 here, so. So is there any other last questions? Any hands being raised? No, we can finish up a little early tonight. And then, as always, thank everybody for the wonderful comments and support. It's really, really empowering. Um, really makes this so much more easier. Um, Another comment. This was unexpected, but I must say thank you. It did instill in me an automatic sense of clean, clear, fearless acceptance and understanding of the fact that death is our only known certain aspects of life on on this moment. It can end whenever, and if it does, it's okay. But also kicked in the let's really enjoy and appreciate the present moment and be the best that we can be to ourselves and to others. Give love, joy, compassion, and be there for one another, helping, sharing, loving, and understanding. Exactly. As I mentioned, death is the great equalizer. Doesn't care if you're good, doesn't care if you're bad, doesn't care if you're wealthy, doesn't care if you're poor. Death is certain, life is uncertain. So instead of always just thinking about ourselves and trying to get what we can, hoard as much as we can, um, try to be big bad, top dog, whatever. But just be beings who have death as our ending. So be there for others, be there for yourself, be there good to yourself, be good to others, practice metta, karuna, mudita, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Be the best we possibly can be. I hope you're not ill and sounds congested. Thank you, Angie. Yeah, my throat is a little little scratchy. But I don't know, I feel fine though. Okay, awesome, everybody. I think we're all good tonight. Let's see. Okay, so I think we're all set for the evening. Thank you everybody for participating. We've accumulated lots of wonderful, great merit by practicing meditation and discussing the Dhamma together. May those who have passed, our loved ones who have passed, may any being who is in need that we cannot see, may they rejoice in those good karma, this good merit that we have accumulated together. May they use it to develop and move through samsara quicker and attain the sweet bliss, which is Nibbana. May we all attain the sweet bliss, which is Nibbana. And say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bhante Mangala. Thank you.
Thank you, Gita.
Thank you,
Sadhu,
Bhante.
sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Ante.
So everyone remember, thank you. We won't have class next week, but the weekend after. So please sign up for the retreat next weekend if you want to participate, and hopefully I'll see you, a bunch of you there. So please take care of yourselves,
Yeah.
take care of each other, continue
Thank
with
you,
practice,
Bhante.
continue with studies, and I'll see you all next time.
Yeah, we'll see you at the retreat. Thank you, Bhante. See you.
Friday.
Bye. Hey, be
Be
safe.
well.
Take care.
Thank you as well.